The dark black poison plants. How do you roll on these barren sands? How do you sleep with blood stains on your hands?
This is Secure Radio, and today we have a great friend, great tennis player, Grand Slam winner, JOHAN KRIEK. He has won 2 Australian Open, was a semi-finalist at the U.S. Open. He reached the semi-finals of the French Open and the quarterfinals of Wimbledon. He has won 14 professional singles and 8 doubles titles, reaching an all-time high of number 7 in the world. KRIEK's most memorable wins include victory over Andre Agassi, Jimmy Connors, John McEnroe, and John Burke. Also, he's a great philanthropist. He's providing water for people in South Africa. Hi, Johan.
Hey, Sigurd, how are you?
How are you? So thank you for being my guest today, and welcome to Secure Radio.
Congratulations on having having such a successful radio station. Good job.
Thank you, sir. Johan, how do you say hello in Zulu? I saw somewhere that you speak Zulu also.
Sabona, Punjani.
Sabona, Punjani. So today we're going to
hello,
talk
how
about
are you?
yes. Today we're going to talk about tennis, and you being a great walk-in library, winning 2 Australian Open is not easy. And today youngsters, they don't have the strategy or the preparation for Australian Open. Usually the tournament come in a holiday, December. And can you tell us, or can you tell the up-and-comer tennis player how you prepare for Australian Open and how to win it?
Yeah, thanks, Heiko. And thanks for the kind words. When you're on a tour, there's this apprentice time, which is about a 2-year, in my opinion. I think it's at least 2 years when you made it on the tour to sort of solidify your personality, you find your feet within the structure of the Pro Tour. Because, as a youngster, you come up, you're 17, 18, 19, you're playing qualifying everywhere, you have no money, and you try to play tournaments, and then you suddenly make enough points to make it into the main draws of these major tournaments. Mine was very strange. Mine was very meteoric. I mean, I arrived in 78 in Florida and was ranked 880 in the world or something. And by that summer, I was on the tour. So it's a tremendous uptick in terms of 6, 7, 8 months of getting from nowhere to where I'm suddenly a player on the tour and people are watching you. So you're not just another nameless face in the tournament in the sea of piranhas. You are now the great white that people want to go for. So, or at least at that time, the first 2 years, I would say you're probably a small tuna. And then the great whites are waiting for you. But so it's an adjustment. It's a mental adjustment. It's a physical adjustment. It's all of the above plus some, and then you're on a tour. But honestly, I lived in Naples, Florida, for 37 years while I was playing on a tour. I used to come up to Nick Bollettieri's and train, and that's where I saw Agassi and all these young whippersnappers when they were in their teenage years. And so I would practice there. So, how did I prepare for the Australian Open? Obviously, the Australian Open back then was also played. Sometimes it was played in December. I think I'm the only player that has won 2 Australian Opens in the same calendar year because they changed the dates around. It's kind of a funny little trivia thing. But, Florida is hot. So I was always practicing in Florida because I felt like if you could practice here during the summer as well, that, you could probably play anywhere in the world. So I was a pretty fit guy anyway, and I was a good athlete, but that's how I kind of prepared. But, the ebbs and flow and the seasons of tennis, for me it wasn't that difficult because I just continuously played. I mean, it was a never-ending cycle of on and off, on and off, on and off, and whether it was December or whether it was June or whether it's September, it doesn't really matter to me. I mean, I was just really geared towards picking all of my tournaments in, say, in November of the year before. I would pick for the rest of the next year. I would know exactly where I was going to play, and very few changes was made because you even had training blocks and time off, and you need time off too. I mean, you can't just become a machine. And I tried to be a machine some years, and it completely backfired on me because I was just so wasted mentally that, and then physically you kind of push yourself, and then you get injured, and that's why the players today are so smart about picking their tournaments.
Right. Thank you for. So in that preparation time for Australian Open, how did you start 1 month prior, 2 months? You have a specific time. How you break that down into how many hours of tennis, fitness, rest time? Can you school us on that?
Well, I mean, if you were top 10 in the world like I was for a long time there, I was playing in the Masters tournament always at the end of the year in Madison Square Garden, and that was always in the first week of December. So the Australian Open would start sometime in January. So you had like maybe at the very most, you had 4 or 5 weeks off. So after the Masters, I would always take 2 weeks off, and Christmas holidays, you take a few days off here and there, but you hit it pretty hard after the 25th of December. And you would play a lot of tennis again. And if you had to change new rackets, companies come up and contracts and all that stuff. So you had a lot of preparation. It was a little bit more intense over that period of time if you wanted to play the Australian Open at that time. And it was on grass too. So it was you had Wimbledon and the Australian Open back in the early 80s. It was on grass, and then it switched to hard courts in Australia to the new place in 1987. So it was a big change from 84, 85 to 87 with a new facility with hard courts, very similar to the U.S. Open. So now the new place is incredible. The old Kooyong is still there, but the new place is just absolutely amazing. But
it's amazing, yes.
Yeah, I had to really, I really have to constantly at that time use the time that I had off very, very sparingly and very appropriately because playing in Florida in December and January is not quite as warm as Australia, but I think later on a lot of players actually went to the Southern Hemisphere. I heard that Hunter Kova used to go to Cape Town in June because it's the same. In January because it's the same temperature as in Australia. So she was playing in the summer in January in Cape Town.
Right. Hunter Kova did that, yes.
Yeah.
So now, Johan, I know you're coming from a great history of tennis. Let's do a little bit of history now. Growing up in South Africa, how did you come in tennis? Because I know Ernie Hels was a tennis player before he converted into golf. So can you school us, how old were you? Who was your mentor to get into tennis at that time?
Really, I mean, I grew up in a very small town called Pongola, and it's a sugar country area in South Africa and Zululand at that time, which is now called KwaZulu-Natal. But back then, South Africa was divided differently in terms of its provinces. But I grew up there on a sugar farm, and my parents were good little athletes, and they played tennis every week. And my dad was actually a phenomenal athlete. He should have been a Springbok rugby player, but he inherited the farm and from the granddad, and then that's where we grew up. But they played tennis at the 2 cement courts that was at the sugar mill, and that's how I started with my parents. I was like 4 years old, so after I ran around and played on the swing sets and stuff, my parents would take me on the court. And then fairly soon after that, I was like 6 years old. I was hitting the ball over the net all the time, and people go, "This kid can play." So then I got into it. But, as a South African boy, you're always into rugby because rugby is the biggest sport there.
Yeah.
Maybe not so much today, but it's still pretty darn big. And the Springboks played yesterday, and now they're playing the World Championship. So you were a total into rugby. So tennis was my hobby. And then at age 10, a coach from Johannesburg came into our town and was sort of scouting for players and heard about me and this other kid. And he looked at me and he says, and I was just murdering the balls at age 10. And he said, look, if this kid really knows why the lines are there, he'll be good one day. And so I was not very consistent. But then I went to high school. I went to boarding school. And, my mentors in that early stage was really my parents. And then there were a couple of people, a German farmer, Siegfried Prieger, and there was another gentleman by the name of Ralph Petty, who was the head of HR at the sugar mill. And they would watch Lever and Rosewall, and all of those guys played in Johannesburg because it was the fifth oldest tournament in the world after the four majors was the South African Open. So they would always watch these guys live, and then they would come to their little farm, and then here's this kid, and they would say, Rosewall slices like this, Lever volleys like this, and Hoed overheads like this, and so those are the names that I heard. And then we would listen to the radio and watch tennis. Listen to the radio for Davis Cup on our little car radios and stuff while we're playing tournaments. It was funny. And so that's how I started. But then my tennis really took off when I went to boarding school in Pretoria, which is where Elon Musk is from. And, Ernie Els is from that area too. But so, it's funny enough that Ernie was a tennis player before he became a golfer. But there was another very famous tennis player that actually became much more famous for cricket. Is this guy Kepler Wessels, who is from the Orange Free State, very smart guy. And Kepler became the captain for the Australian cricket team. And he and I played junior tennis together. In fact, he was really, really good. He beat me one time so badly, and then it rained, and I came off. And I came back on the court an hour and a half later, and I beat him because the rain delay completely changed everything. And I beat him. And then we were sitting in the locker room, and we were like 14, 15 years old. And he says to me, he says, you know what? I think I'm going to play cricket. I'm not going to play. I'm not going to play tennis anymore. I thought he was joking, and he sure as hell he quit tennis. He became a cricketer, and he ended up going to Australia at the same time I came to the United States. He emigrated to Australia, and he became eventually an Australian, and then he became the cricket captain. Unbelievable story.
Unbelievable story. Yes. Now let's go to tennis side. What do you think about bringing coaches on the court, like the Davis Cup, like other sports, basketball? They all have coaches on the side. I know. In your time, you have to battle on your own. What is your intake on that? If we were to bring in coaches next to the players on the court,
I can totally understand the purists saying, and even Roger Federer says this. This is you and the other guy. But, I just think that that's passé. I think those days are gone. I think that tennis needs new infusion. It needs new things. It needs to upgrade. It needs to transform. It needs to upgrade. And, why would you have now with these guys with the money they make, they have an entire team of people sitting in the stands in one area, and they are not supposed to say anything. They can only cheer. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, there's no sport in the world where, where you got to be, you have a coach, you have all these things. I think it's way overdue. I for one, I think they can easily implement the rules. Look what they've done with Laver Cup. There's guys sitting on the side, they're cheering their friends on. It's just a new dynamic. I think it's archaic to think that tennis coaching should not be allowed. Now, I know there's a lot of players that will say, oh, you're crazy, KRIEK, because this is a purest thing, and it's you against the other guy, and you don't need any help. BS. I mean, tennis is in need of an infusion, and I think they should allow coaching. And if they want to have something new into tennis, I think they should do that.
Oh, good. All right. Good point. Good point, Johan. I know, let's talk about your academy. I know you have converted it into teaching, but the question I have for you first, I would like you to tell us a little bit about your academy, because many people now know you at your own KRIEK Academy, the Springbok, if I remember. What is a Springbok? A lot of people don't know what a Springbok means. Can you tell us what is? I know what it is, but my listeners don't know.
Well, the national rugby team in South Africa is called the Springboks. So if you see them play, they all have the green jerseys and the gold or orange trim. But a Springbok in South Africa back in the day, if you